Look at me when I'm talking to you. You hear me. I run this block, not you. Look at you now. Pathetic. That cool you off yet, boy?
Stop scrolling. One reckless move, one silent legend, and a prison cafeteria that went dead quiet. A notorious bully targeted the newest black inmate, not knowing he was the deadliest MMA champion in history. What happened next wasn't a brawl. It was a masterclass in power without chaos. They called him Jamal Price. Tall, calm, eyes like still water. On day one, he stepped off the bus with nothing but a small book and a folded photo, face unreadable under the fluorescent lights. The chain clinked off his cuffs like a warning bell to anyone listening. He didn't look left, didn't look right. Just followed the painted line on the floor like he'd already decided exactly where he was going and why. Word moved fast in places like this. New blood on the block. Some said he looked too composed, too steady, like a storm that had already chosen its shoreline. He didn't posture, didn't puff, didn't try to make himself bigger or smaller. He walked like a metronome ticking, controlled, precise, impossible to rush. In a place built on staring contests, he didn't blink. His first look at the cell was quick. Bed, shelf, bricks, sink. No judgment in his eyes, just assessment. He placed the book on the shelf, the folded photo beneath it, then stood for a still second, breathing. Not the panicked breath of the newly caged, a practiced inhale, a measured exhale. You know the kind, an athlete's breath, a surgeon's breath. The kind that makes rooms lean closer without knowing why. Night hit hard and fluorescent. Jamal didn't talk to his cellie beyond a nod. He didn't ask questions, didn't trade stories. He sat on the edge of the bunk and counted off a slow set of push-ups, each one the same speed, nose hovering a hair above the concrete, like he was reading secrets in the floor. When he finished, he wiped the sweat off with a towel and lay back, eyes open, listening to the clatter, the coughs, the metal bellyache of the building itself. Before dawn, while the block still dreamt about anywhere else, Jamal moved. No rush, no noise. He stretched like a cat, rolled his shoulders and began another round. Push-ups, planks, slow squats. Not a prison yard show, a ritual. Every motion tight to the line, no wasted effort. He wasn't chasing burn. He was building control. If you watched long enough, you could see patterns inside patterns. Foot placements measured to the same cracks. Breath synced to the hum of the vent like a drummer finding the pocket. The routine didn't stop when the doors slid. In the chow line, Jamal kept a respectful distance, close enough to keep his spot, far enough to diffuse elbows. He said thank you to the server and meant it. He sat with his back toward the wall, not the corner, which told the real watchers he wasn't hiding, just ready. He ate slow, not out of fear, out of choice. Fork down between bites, eyes soft, attention wide. Veterans of the block watched him the way fishermen watch water, looking for ripples. One lifer, a quiet man called Booker, noticed details others missed. Old scar on the brow, knuckles that weren't brute thick, but dense with healed stories. The kind of hands that learn more than they break. Booker nudged a younger guy and said, "That one came here with breaks. Watch how he uses them." The younger guy didn't understand. He would. Rumors run quicker than laundry cycles, ex-military, college teacher, a preacher who had a bad day. Someone swore they saw him on a poster once. Someone else said he was a ghost. Nobody you could look up, nobody you could forget. Jamal ignored the whispers like he ignored the TV in the common room, there but not his. He read, he wrote. He moved through the chaos like he had a private map the rest of the world couldn't see. 2 tests came early, the kind that skate under the radar. First, a bump in the corridor. Nothing big, just shoulders grazing on purpose. Most men would square up or look away. Jamal did neither. He turned, offered a steady "my bad," and gave space without surrendering a millimeter of balance. The other guy felt it, the weird gravity in that politeness, and let it go because some part of him decided to sue second test, a joke at his expense during laundry. Not funny, not harmless, the kind meant to see how thin your skin is. Jamal smiled without showing teeth and kept folding. Crisp corners, perfect stacks. He didn't defend himself with words. He defended himself by refusing to be dragged into the mess. A few eyes narrowed, taking notes. You can't poke calm forever and expect it to stay calm. Or can you? What really shook people wasn't what he did. It was what he didn't do. No long stares, no pacing, no loud calls home to prove he had someone. He didn't borrow, didn't lend. When he cleaned his area, he did it with rhythm. When he walked the tier, he walked the line. That kind of control is rare inside. It's also a flare in the night sky for men who run on domination. They read silence as a challenge. They smell steady like a dare. And that's where the legend of Tank crashes into the story. Tank didn't need a list of rules. He was the list. He ran the common room with a clockwork cruelty, predictable enough to fear, wild enough to obey. He respected strength, but mostly the loud kind, the kind that announces itself with force, tattoos, a laugh too big for the room. Jamal had none of that. Jamal had gravity. It pulled attention the way moonlight pulls the tide. Tank watched him from a distance at first, measured him, the way Jamal placed his tray, the way he never rushed toward or away from anything, the way men started borrowing Jamal's presence to feel safe, even if they didn't know they were doing it. Tank knew the economy of attention, and Jamal was messing with the market without saying a word. There was a moment, blink and you miss it, that sealed it. In the yard, a ball skidded out of a pickup game and rolled toward Jamal's feet. He caught it with a foot like it weighed a secret, tapped it back with a little spin, and lifted a hand in apology toward the players without breaking stride. It wasn't flashy. It was cleaner than flashy. Clean ruins peacocks. Tank saw that, felt it. If you've ever been in a room where the temperature drops without the thermostat changing, you know what happened next. The old order sensed a disturbance. Not noise, not rebellion, just a different definition of power. Jamal moved like his body and his mind were on the same page, and that's rare currency. The kind that buys you eyes. The kind that buys you enemies. And that's exactly why Tank noticed. Tank ran the common room like a bad myth. Big scars, bigger ego. He had a way of making the air feel small. Newcomers paid a tax, food, favors, respect, or all three. Missed the hint, and Tank made you the example everyone remembered. He had a routine. Corner the new guy at lunch, take the tray, demand a thank you just to seal the humiliation. He didn't flex for the cameras. There were none. He flexed for the room, for the whispers, for the way silence traveled faster than words. Ask anyone on C Block about his greatest hits, and they'd tell you about the rookie who tried to hold onto an apple and spent a week eating last. The one who couldn't say thank you without swallowing pride like broken glass. Tank didn't just take things, he took balance. He took certainty. The cafeteria was Tank's stage. Stainless steel counters, flipped chairs, a TV hissing reruns no one watched. You could smell bleach and boiled beans in the air, hear the scrape of trays and the jitter of plastic forks. Guards leaned on railings, pretending not to watch everything. Every lunch had a rhythm. Laughter here, coughs there, low voices clumped like storm clouds. And then there was the current underneath it all. The attention economy Tank controlled with a single look. On Jamal's third day, that current snapped tight. The buzz turned electric, a crackle you felt in your teeth. Tank drifted in like a wave ready to break, hands loose at his sides, chin up, a smile that wasn't joy so much as calculation. His crew spread like shadows, not close enough to make it obvious, close enough to make it inevitable. Eyes followed him across the room. Some eyes dropped, some pretended to, but the truth is nobody looked away. Even the guys who never looked at anything couldn't help it. That's how you knew a story was about to be written. Every head wants the page. Jamal sat mid-row, not hiding near the wall, not flexing in the center. He had his tray angled just so, elbows tucked in, fork moving slow like a metronome. He wasn't distracted. He was present. Calm in a way that felt expensive. The kind of calm you can't buy. You build it. Tank stepped beside the table and tapped the tray with one knuckle. Clink. That sound cut through the room like a blade through fabric. Every small conversation got quietly vacuumed out of the air. Someone's spoon paused halfway to their mouth and stayed there. Even the TV seemed to turn itself down. New guy, Tank said, voice smooth with menace. You know how this works. It wasn't a question. It was a ritual. You say yes, you hand over the tray, you say thank you, and you go learn how to live with less. You say no, and you learn how to live with pain. The room knew the script. It had seen the ending 100 times. Jamal lifted his eyes, steady, respectful, not afraid, the kind of look that notices everything without collecting trophies. He didn't straighten his back in a show of strength because it was already straight. He didn't ball his fists because his hands were already open, resting on the table the way fog rests on water. I don't want trouble, he said. You don't either, gasps rippled, not loud but sharp. Who talks like that to Tank? Some men smirked ready for the smash. Some looked at the door like they needed exits. You could almost hear the clock pause. Jamal didn't blink. He didn't shift to the left, didn't shift to the right. The only thing that moved was a breath. Inhale, exhale, even that seemed measured. If you were standing close, you'd notice little details. The heels of his shoes lightly anchored, knees under the table at an angle that wasn't submissive or confrontational, just prepared. His shoulders down, neck long, palms loose. No tells, no tremors. If there was fear, it had agreed to wait outside. Tank's crew prowled at the edges, exchanging those quick animal glances that mean, if he stands, you go left, I'll go right. But Tank didn't need them, not yet. He was measuring. And this was a man who'd built a life on sizing people up. He was reading the wristbones, the way Jamal's eyes didn't dart to count exits, the steady cadence of that voice that didn't rise to fill the space. There are ways of being that don't ask permission. They simply exist. It irritated Tank. It intrigued him more. A guard on the tier shifted his weight like he could feel the temperature drop. Another guard, the kind who pretends not to care, casually adjusted the radio clip on his shoulder. They'd seen Tank do this dance, only this time something about the rhythm felt new, offbeat, dangerous for reasons that weren't loud. 2 tables over, Booker, the observer, leaned forward just a fraction, eyes narrowed. He'd seen men bluff. This wasn't that. This was a man who didn't have to bluff because he understood the cost of every choice on the board. Pay the tax, you owe forever. Throw the first punch, you spend your days hunting corners and shadows. Say nothing, you get eaten. Find the 4th road that nobody else sees. That's a different game. Tank's shadow fell over the tray. He didn't reach yet. The tap had announced his claim. Now came the show. Tank liked the thank you best. That was where he prized the soul from the shell, not with force but with theater. He loved to make a man say grateful words about his own surrender. You think I want trouble? Tank asked, smile drifting across his mouth, voice low and deadly sweet. I collect what's owed. Keeps the peace. Jamal's head tilted the smallest degree. Peace isn't bought, he said softly. It's kept. A tremor went through the room. It wasn't volume. It was voltage. Some men looked down at their food because eye contact felt illegal now. Others watched like they were at the edge of a cliff, drawn forward without meaning to. Tank's eyes flicked to Jamal's hands again. He noticed no tension in the knuckles, no clench in the jaw. He noticed something else, the absence of flinch. Most men, even the brave ones, carry a spark of anticipation. Jamal's stillness wasn't dead. It was alive with choice, that unnerved people who make chaos their currency. How do you bully someone who refuses the exchange? The distance between them was less than an arm's length, but it felt like a mile of wire strung tight. The ceiling lights hummed. A tray rattled somewhere in the back, then stopped like it remembered its place. Footsteps on the tiers slowed down. Every sense in the room leaned forward. There are moments when a story can pivot, when a legend can be born or broken. Tank could have flipped the tray. He could have made a scene big enough to swallow the whole room. He could have reached for the thank you and forced it, the way he always did. Instead, he did something else, something he almost never did, something that made the hair on the back of necks lift. And here's where it gets wild. Tank smiled. When power feels challenged, it lunges. Tank snatched for the tray. Jamal didn't flinch. He simply shifted, a fraction of an inch. Space opened. Tank grabbed air. The metal edge kissed the table and hummed. A fork rattled once, then surrendered to silence. Jamal's chair legs stayed planted, the tiniest pivot turning chaos into nothing at all. It wasn't flashy. It was surgical. Like he knew exactly how much movement the moment could hold, and never used to drop more. Time thinned to a thread. You could hear the hum of the vent, the static of a guard's radio, the soft clink of someone setting their cup down by mistake. Somewhere a laugh died half-born. Even the light seemed to lean in, pooling harder on the table. Like the room wanted to see the exact shape of what would happen. Tank's shoulders rolled forward, arms spreading for a shove, the move he'd used 100 times to topple men and their pride together. Jamal's body answered like a reflex, a language he'd learned bone-deep, step, angle, guide. He didn't fight the force. He escorted it. No wind-up. No theatrics. A subtle turn of the hips, the grace of a door swinging on a perfectly oiled hinge. The room blinked and Tank's wrist was captured, his elbow gently redirected, his balance stolen by an invisible lever. It looked like nothing. It felt like gravity had changed its mind. No punch, no kick, just precision. Tank's knees touched the floor with a dull thud that sounded heavier than it should have. Not pain. Disbelief. Jamal kept a calm grip, not tight, not cruel, more like a reminder of where the edges were. He leaned in, voice low and even, the kind of voice that doesn't need to be loud to be heard. Breathe. You push, I pull. You stop, I stop. Those words unspooled through the cafeteria like a wire. Shock, silence. The air tightened and held. 20 trays barely rattled on metal tables, because nobody dared move enough to make noise. Tank's crew froze, weight shifting onto the balls of their feet, instincts barking, minds doing math. If they lunged, they'd make a riot. If they waited, they'd admit what everyone just saw. And what everyone saw was control that didn't feed on chaos. Control that didn't want applause. A guard shouted, the command snapping down from the tier. Jamal released immediately, hands opening like a sunrise, stepping back with palms up and shoulders loose. No swagger, no smirk. Compliance as clean as the technique that got him here. He even took one extra step to give Tank space, as if returning balance was part of the promise he'd just made. Tank stayed where he was, blinking, confused, furious. But the fury wasn't running the show anymore. Something else had climbed into the driver's seat. Awareness. Not fear, not exactly. The sudden, blinding awareness that whatever measure he'd been using to size the world was small. He had always been the storm. Now he'd met the coastline that didn't move. Murmurs rippled, stopped, then curled back in like waves that didn't dare touch shore. A plastic cup tipped and rolled in a circle, the sound thin and embarrassed. Booker, 2 tables over, exhaled through his nose like a man who'd been waiting for proof of something he already believed. One of Tank's guys started to step, then saw Jamal's open hands and couldn't find a reason to keep going. Jamal didn't chase the advantage. He didn't rise. He didn't pose. He did the most disarming thing in the room. He returned to stillness. Then, with a quiet scrape that somehow cut deeper than any speech, he slid his tray toward Tank. "Eat," he said. "And no debts." The words fell like a verdict and a gift at once. No gloat, no stain. An invitation that didn't feel like surrender and didn't feel like demand. It rewired the economy of the room in a single breath. If Tank took it, he accepted a meal without conquest. So if he refused, he admitted hunger, of one kind or another. Every jaw tightened at once. A guard's hand hovered over a baton and then eased off. The TV in the corner babbled to itself, irrelevant now. Men stared at the tray as if it were a mirror, seeing something about themselves they didn't expect to see. Tank's fingers flexed, unsure where to land. He stood slowly, the scrape of his kneecaps against the floor loud in the quiet. His eyes flicked to Jamal's, searching for mockery and finding none. Only that steady presence, that unblinking calm like deep water. The offer hadn't been a trick. It had been a line drawn carefully across chaos. Here is a way through. Tank didn't say thank you. Jamal didn't need it. Respect wasn't a word right now. It was a choice not to break what had just been held together with restraint. Tank nudged the tray an inch back. Not rejection, not acceptance. A pause in a conversation whose grammar had changed. This wasn't just survival. It was grace with an edge. It told every watcher, every whisperer, every man making mental bets in the corners. The loudest power isn't always the strongest, and the strongest doesn't always need to be loud. By nightfall, the whisper had a name: Jamal Price, the Phantom. Undefeated in the cage, title belts. The deadliest champion because he barely seemed to hit you at all, but when he did, you didn't move. He'd retired before most of them knew the sport. Vanished after fame. No scandals, no swagger, just gone. The story traveled faster than steam through pipes. A guy in C-Block swore he'd seen Jamal's face on an old poster taped inside a barbershop. Another said his cousin had trained at a gym where a coach used to point at grainy footage and say, That's how you make a man miss himself. A guard with cauliflower ears, quiet, careful, watched Jamal's footwork and muttered, "Not jailhouse. That's art." Nobody had proof. They didn't need it. The room had already felt the answer. How did a man like that end up here? Nobody knew. Theories bloomed in the corners like mold. Wrong place, wrong time. A self-defense call that didn't land. Taking time for someone he wouldn't name. A plea bargain gone crooked. Some said he'd turned himself in. Others swore he was framed. Jamal didn't feed any of it. He didn't wear his past like a badge, and he didn't trade it for leverage. He read, he worked out, he wrote letters. He kept the storms inside him on a short leash. Every night he pulled out the folded photo and set it on his knee like a compass. He wrote slowly, not because words were hard, but because he wanted each one to arrive intact wherever it was going. "Eat breakfast," one line read. "Sleep when the house sleeps." Another, "You are not your last mistake." He dated the letters, stacked them, and sealed them with patience. When he trained, he moved like a man keeping a promise. When he rested fully, as if recovery itself were a discipline. The nickname spread because it fit. The Phantom. He didn't stalk. He appeared. He didn't chase. He arrived. A palm turned here, a shoulder's breadth there, and gravity did the dirty work. Men who prided themselves on reading fights could not read him. He didn't telegraph. He didn't decorate. He erased. Tank felt the rumor cut both ways. On one edge, it nicked his pride. On the other, it stroked his curiosity. Legends are expensive, and this one had just walked into his economy and balanced the books without paying the tax. The cafeteria moment wouldn't leave him. Not the kneel. Not the release. Not the tray sliding across steel like a peace offering with teeth. Tank showed up at Jamal's bunk that evening, 2 steps away from violence, a lifetime away from humility. The tier was half-lit and echoey, the kind of hour when voices travel and men pretend they're not listening. Tank's shadow reached the bunk first. His crew hung back at the rail, all shoulders and silence. "Round 2?" he asked, voice tight. It wasn't a question about fists alone. It was about the story, about whether Tank's legend got to overwrite what the room had seen. Jamal met his eyes. "No rounds," he said. "Not here. Not for them." The words landed like chalk lines on a floor. Them, the crowd, the watchers. The machine that always wants more. The men who live off theatre, who feed the rumour mill with broken noses and bragging rights. Jamal wasn't judging. He was naming the cost. A second act would turn a lesson into a spectacle, and a man into content. He wouldn't do it. A breathless quiet gathered. Even the card game down the tier forgot to slap the table. Tank didn't move. He didn't nod. He just stood there, balancing on the edge of the old world and something new. The old world said, take the win back, prove it wasn't an accident, make him pay interest. The new thing, whatever Jamal had offered, said, walk away and still be whole. Tank's jaw worked like it wanted to grind steel. Scars along his cheek tugged with the clench. He searched Jamal's face for a smirk, a flinch, a dare. He found none. Just the same steady water he'd seen at lunch, the same open hands that had refused to cash in on humiliation. There was no trap to spring, no escalator to ride, only a choice. Behind Tank, one of his guys shifted, ready to fill the silence with bravado. Tank lifted a finger without looking back. The guy froze. Even gravity seemed to wait for Tank to speak. Jamal didn't fill the space. He didn't preach. He offered a quiet that wasn't empty, a place to set something down. It's a rare sort of power, the kind that doesn't need witnesses to be real. Then Tank did the most unexpected thing in his career. He walked away. The yard felt different the next day. Not safer, not softer. Just clearer, lines redrawn. Jamal trained alone, shadowboxing with air, feet whispering across concrete. His breaths came in even measures, 4 in through the nose, 6 out like fog on glass, hands floating and settling, elbows tight, chin tucked. He wasn't fighting ghosts. He was calibrating. Tank watched from afar, jaw clenched, mind racing, replaying the cafeteria in slow motion and seeing something new every time. Finally, he approached. No audience this time. No crew orbiting like moons. Just the two of them and the quiet scrape of sneakers. Teach me, he said, words like gravel. Not how to fight. How to do what you did. Jamal nodded once. First lesson? Control is a gift you give yourself. They started with breathing. Not push-ups. Not pain. Breathing. Feet under hips, Jamal said, tapping the concrete with a toe. Unlock the knees. Stack the ribs over the pelvis. Inhale and fill the back, not the chest. Exhale longer than you inhale. He placed 2 fingers on Tank's sternum. Drop this. Let your shoulders hang from your breath, not hold your breath up. Tank tried. The first few exhales came out like static, impatient and clipped. Jamal waited for them to lengthen. Again, he said, voice soft but certain. You're not winning a moment. You're shaping one. Footwork next. Jamal drew an invisible triangle on the ground with his toes. Front point, back left, back right. Never cross your feet. Move the floor under you. He showed a step so small it barely counted as movement, just enough to change angles without ceding space. Your power is already there. Aim it. Tank followed, stumbling over his own mass the way a truck fishtails in rain. Jamal touched his elbow, adjusted the line of his shoulder. Less muscle. More map. He guided Tank's eyes. Soft focus. See the whole picture, not just my face. Balance drills. Jamal pressed Tank's shoulder with 2 fingers. I'm going to move you, he said. Your job is to put yourself back where you want to be before I stop. A gentle nudge. Tank swayed, then found center. Again, again, again. Sweat built at Tank's hairline, not from effort, but from the frustration of doing nothing loudly. Jamal didn't gloat. He didn't rush. He counted breaths, then steps, then half steps, and suddenly Tank's feet got quiet. His shoulders dropped. His hands opened. Good, Jamal said simply. Less storm. More tide. Whispers turned into curiosity. 2 more inmates joined, then 5, then a dozen. Jamal didn't advertise and he didn't refuse. Same rules, he said. Breath before hands. Eyes before feet. Control before contact. No belts to win, no points to prove. Just focus, discipline, respect. They practiced turning, not trading. They practiced yielding a 1/4 inch instead of taking a swing. The yard built its first real peace treaty, under the watch of a man who could end fights in a heartbeat, and chose not to. Guards noticed the shift without naming it. Fewer glares, fewer shoulder checks, more space where space used to collapse. One CO with a wrestler's ears paused by the chalked triangle and said nothing at all, then kept walking with his radio quiet. Weeks later, a scuffle flared near the weight rack. 2 guys, same bench, old grudge. The plates clanged, voices sharpened, and the old reflexes hissed, hungry for chaos. Tank moved first, but not how he used to. He didn't surge. He stepped. Shoulders down, hands open. He placed himself between them like a door that can't slam. Not here, he said, echoing Jamal, not for them. His eyes did the rest. Present, unblinking, not daring, not begging, simply pointing to a different road. Jamal stood 10 feet away, not intervening, just anchoring the air. The 2 men looked at Tank, then at Jamal, then at each other, and the fire died, not smothered by force, Starved by choice. If you're waiting for the big cinematic brawl, here's your curveball. The most jaw-dropping moment wasn't the takedown. It was the decision to end it without damage. In a world that worships loud victories, Jamal's quiet win hit harder than any punch. The room learned a new sound: silence as a muscle. 1 month after the cafeteria, Tank found Jamal on the track at dusk, the sky bruised purple over the wall. He walked a lap beside him before speaking. "Oh, you could have embarrassed me," he said finally. "You didn't," Jamal shrugged, a half-smile ghosting across his face. "Real fighters aren't hunting trophies," he said. "They're protecting tomorrow." "Tomorrow," Tank repeated, tasting the word like a foreign food. He nodded. "I get it." The sun bled out behind the razor wire. The yard buzzed with a new kind of energy, steady, focused, unafraid. Someone had changed the rules without shouting. The bully learned that dominance isn't power. Choice is, and choice once seen is hard to forget. It travels from one breath to one step, to a whole yard learning how not to break. If this story lit a fire in you, tap that like button, share it with someone who needs a reminder of real strength, and subscribe for more unstoppable stories of grit and redemption. New episodes drop weekly. Don't miss what's next. And I want to hear from you. If you were Jamal, would you reveal who you were or keep it quiet? When Tank reached for that tray, what would you have done? Drop your take in the comments. I'm reading every single one.